Okay, I guess we're live. Hi, my name is Philip Bauer from the company Untitled, and I want to show you how you can make Plone migrations fun again using a small tool that I created. This is by far not the first talk I've ever done on migrations. So starting in 2013, I started talking and writing about migrations. There was a short break when I was busy writing the Python 3 migration between 2015 and 18. Then in 2018, I gave a talk on migrations to Python 3. Then I thought the final talk on migrations ever. There would never be another requirement for any talk about migrations. Obviously, I was wrong. So I did a talk about issues that you have after migrations with the ZODB. And yeah, now it's 2021 and we're still talking about migrations. One of the reasons why migrations are such a huge topic is that there is not like the one migration. But there, from the technical point of view, there is at least the migration between Plone versions, for example, from Plone 4 to 5 or 6, then from content type frameworks, from archetypes to dexterity, then from Python 2 to Python 3, and then from add-ons that rearrange or change organize your content, for example, from LinguaPlone to PloneUp Multilingual, which LinguaPlone, as you probably may know, is not supported in Plone 5 and not supported by Dexterity. So if you have a site that is using the first, it has to be done. So these are at least 4 migrations, and imagine there are more because you have different content types. You want them to migrate to other content types. You have content that needs to go away, which is also kind of a migration to dev-null. Other content that needs to go into other places, users that need to be migrated, and so on and so forth. So there's a couple of options. One is the in-place migrations. If you want, you can watch the migrations talk and Growing Pains as a follow-up regarding that. This covers if you use, for example, collective migration helpers, a small tool of helpers that I wrote for migrations. These probably cover most of the interesting cases there. And then there's Transmogrifier, which is a export-import migration. And then why do I have another? Yeah, same slide. Interesting. And then there is export-import. There is a bunch of custom existing code. For example, Red Turtle has an interesting package to do export-import migrations. Andreas Jung published some code that does export-import migrations. And now then there's also collective import-export, which will probably be succeeded by the package I'm talking about now. But it all remains to be seen. These are the options. You do that in place, you keep the database, and the main point is, imagine you have content, for example, a document. The in-place migrations takes this document within the database and changes it while the application is running. For example, the archetypes to dexterity migration creates a new version of this same object, moves the attributes and the many settings one by one from the old object to the new object, and then drops the old object. It keeps the UUID in place on the new object, and so on and so forth. So that's a complex project. And the export-import story that's also used by Transmogrifier, which is, I have to say, more tailored to developers, is to export the content from the database, have it in some intermediate place on the file system, for example, in JSON, and then re-import it. And that's also what we're doing now. So why this package? Kim, it's his fault because he wrote this flame alert thingy on the Plone Python 3 upgrade story, and he wrote, I hope you see the font here, the process is complicated and full of black magic. Sorry, Kim, that was annoying. I was annoyed. And I wrote, the migration to Python 3 is neither complicated nor full of magic. It consists of one command that you only need to run, but this is obviously too hard for you. I was totally wrong. I know that because the migrations are hard, and running commands in the terminal is not fun at all. So I guess you want something that does all these 4 migrations and more at once, and even has a nice user interface. And here it is. It's called collective.exportimport, and it will solve many, but not all use cases. And I'm going to go through a couple of these use cases, and I'm definitely going to mention the limitations that there are. So it supports export and import for, most importantly, content, because Plone is a content management system and not a relation management system, even though it sometimes feels like it. So most importantly, it supports export and import for content, all content, any content. It supports export and import for members and groups and their respective roles. It supports exporting and importing relations, any kind of relations, provided you have the nifty package collective relation helpers installed. The code that is required for the importing will be in Plone 6 at some point. I don't think we have it merged yet. So for the moment, you require collective relation helpers, which is not hard to get. It supports export and import of translations, local roles on objects, and that's actually not really easy, the order, the position, and the parent. And also, last but not least, there's a tiny thing that resets after an import the modified date, because during importing, content is touched and edited and changed and modified, and everything would have a modification date of the second that it was imported. And this is then with a small helper reset to the original modification date. The export supports Plone 4, 5, and 6. It supports archetypes and dexterity, Python 2 and Python 3. It supports PloneUp multilingual, LinguaPlone, and even Raptus multilingual fields. I'll get to that in a second later. The import only, I never tested importing into archetypes or into Python 4, because why? Plone 4, why would you want to do that? There's no reason for that. So import only supports Plone 5.2. I think I never tried it otherwise. It only supports dexterity because, yeah, obviously. It actually supports Python 2 and Python 3. I'm not sure why you want to import into Python 2, but there you go. And it only supports PloneUp multilingual because Plone 5 only supports PloneUp multilingual. There are a couple of use cases you can solve with this. Number one, obviously, is migrations. That's what I'm talking about. But you could also use it to archive content as JSON. You can use it to export some data to prepare a migration to another system if your client is willing to leave Plone for, I don't know, whatever crappy system they dream up. Then you can combine content from multiple Plone sites into one. Obviously, using this method, there are other tools that can do that, maybe even better, but it is a use case. I never did that, but yeah, there you go. You can import a Plone site as a sub-site into another site because it's only content. It's just, you just import it into a special place. You have a site, it's split in two. You can combine it with this technology, export-import. And you can import content from other systems as long as the data structure fits the required format. The good thing is this format is well documented. The details. Before we go into the details, I'll show you a very quick demo of a, I hope this is the right one, yeah, of a running Plone site. It's a Plone 4 site in this case, where I installed this add-on. So here's the Plone site. Ta-da. After a while, it's hopefully coming. Yes, it seems to be coming. It's a client that we're currently in the process of migrating this client. Actually, this is an in-place migration that we're doing, but this is just a demo. So there's a view called export content, and there's another view. Guess what it's called? It's called import content. And if you call this view, it gives you a nice user interface that is not full of black magic at all. And you can select the content type that you want to export. So here's your form. You can select the content type. There's lots of content types in this site, including custom content types like projects, for example. Then you can choose if the data from image and file fields should be stored as base 4664 encoded strings, which is the default and makes sense unless ... I'll get to that. Then you can either download to the laptop I'm using or save to the server. In this case, it's the same machine, so it doesn't really matter. But if you save it on a server, you don't have to download huge files. You just click, and it logs. In this case, it logs that is exporting 218 projects. It takes a while. It tells me how many it already managed to do, and then it gives me a JSON file with all the content in it. There's quite a lot of text in this site, so this is why opening this JSON file takes a while. It's not that huge. It's, let's see if it has more than a couple of megabytes. It's actually 24 megabytes, so there's lots of text in that. And then you see the data structure of the result. It's a list of dictionaries in JSON format. For each item, there's one, and it has UUID and has all the fields in the schema, all the information that you need, including the binary data. That's why this file is so large. So it has the lead image behavior. You guess, yeah, collective lead image, I think it's called. And it has, so here's your files, the binary files. That's why opening that took so long. These binary files. So here's your data for projects. You can do the same, for example, for translations. These are links to browser views that you can also call by yourself, and exports translations. It's now running, and it does the export. And in a second, I shall have, oops, I just lost that. It's 122 kilobytes. It's not that huge, and this is the format for translation. So language and UUID, and so on and so forth. So let's go back to the presentation. This is how it works, and importing works similar. You have a form where you upload these files, and they have, the form has for each content type, and it has links to forms where you can upload your translations, your groups, and your users groups and roles, which is one file, your relations, and so on and so forth. The details are, obviously, I didn't write the logic myself, because there is the Plone REST API, the best thing since sliced bread. It supports serializing and deserializing content. And thanks to people I used to mock, not because of the people, because they wrote serializers and deserializers for archetypes, it is actually possible. I'm really, really grateful for the hard work they did, because now it's possible to export and import archetypes content. And with the tiny changes, I'll talk about these in a second, you can export archetypes and import as dexterity, which the import only supports dexterity, as far as I know. Never tested, as I said. So this is this is basically all of it. This is the whole thing. Everything else is a wrapper around getting a serializer for an object and then serializing it. And the same for deserialization, that is the import. It creates an object to hold the deserialized data, then it deserializes the data in the dictionary, and voila, you have all your data in your field. So there's one huge benefit of using this this approach. The reason is that a lot of the data that you're importing is automatically validated. So it says validate all equals false, but still, and because some validations are annoying, maybe I should change that, I don't know, we can discuss that. But for example, if you have an item that has a choice field where the data comes from a vocabulary, the data that you're importing is validated, and it throws an error when you're importing data that has no respective values in the vocabulary for your choice field. So that saves you from importing data that fails later on. It makes sure that your data is sane. So the lot, it's built, collective export import is built as you can just add it to your build-out. It doesn't even need to be installed. It works if you use export import or export content or import content, just works out of the box. But it is for many use cases, it is probably good to customize that a little. And there it has a couple of hooks, and here are some examples how to use that. So you just subclass it. It's an easy way to customize the code. So you can add a custom query for each content type to say only migrate or export, in this case, only export documents that are actually published or pending and not the private ones. Just drop these. So this is a way to customize the export per content type. You can drop certain paths in your portal. In this example, there's a user portal, which is like a subsite. It's a huge thing, and so it's just go away. And you can even drop individual UUIDs if you have really problematic objects in your database. You're too lazy to actually delete them, or you can't delete them. That can happen, yes. Then you can drop these during export and they will be ignored. Then you can change the request. For example, this is useful for Raptus Multilingual because it gives you different data depending on what the request language is. There is a global object hook where you can inspect the content item that is to be exported but hasn't been exported yet before serializing the data. So if you shouldn't change the object in this place because you're changing your data source, which is probably not a good idea, but you can decide depending on, I don't know, whatever you want to dream up, if you want to return the object or return none. If you return none, this object's not going to be exported. Then there's the global Dict hook that has the serialized data and the object that was serialized, and you can use this method based on information on the object, or I don't know, on the object's parent, for example, to change the data in the item. The item is the dictionary of the serialized data, and you can add information to that. For example, I don't know, default page settings, layout, change the layout, whatnot. And then there's a Dict hook underscore name of the content type in a safe form without spaces, for example. And you can use this if you have more complex setups to say, okay, this code is run for all documents that are exported, and you have the same way you need to return the item or none if you want to drop this item. Yeah, that's your way to modify the export. The import can do similar things. You can define a container per content type and pass a path here. This path needs to exist. No, I think the path will be created if it doesn't exist. Can't remember. You can drop certain fields. For example, related items doesn't make sense to drop to export relation fields. I'll get to that in a second. You can drop certain UUIDs, drop certain paths from the exported data. You can set defaults for certain fields. Then you have, similar to the export, you have a global Dict hook where you can modify the serialized data before it is deserialized. So you have the dictionary, and before an item is created, you can change that. For example, you can change the content type. And the same can be done Dict hook custom type. So you have your per type, you have a Dict hook. That is actually a better choice better place to change the content type. The first example in the custom Dict hook has a couple of two examples for fields that are serialized differently in archetypes than in dexterity. So there is one small example how you need to change your data to be able to migrate that from archetypes to dexterity. And then there is a useful handler for the container, handle underscore content type underscore container, and you need to return an object for the container. Otherwise, it will be created in the place that it used to be, and it's created in the path is walked through. If the parent is missing, it is created as a folder. That has some problems. I'll get into that. I'll show you a couple of examples for what we did with this. Yeah, so the first one is for the Max Planck Center and data computing and data facility. We did a partial, I'm not going to show you any code, it's not that interesting, partial migration. So this is basically an in-place migration from Plone 4 to Plone 5, Python 2 to Python 3, archetypes to dexterity, and it's done in place using, well, all the technologies I already documented for in-place migrations. But there was this one content type that just wouldn't be migrated. It was in an archetype site. It was created with the early version of dexterity through the web, and there was no Python code for these objects anywhere, and the migration somehow failed, and I refused to spend more time on that and decided to just export this one content type and import that after the in-place migration was done. So that is a nice way to deal with objects that cause problems during a migration. You just decide, okay, let's ignore this issue for now, drop it during the in-place migration, and just export the data and import the data. And that was like, it's done it was done in an hour. That was good. Then Dynajet, oh, there's a typo. There was a partial migration. I'm actually going to show you the result because we're pretty proud of the result. One of our first Plone clients from many years ago, we just migrated that to Plone 6. Plone 6, not alpha, but master, Plone master branch. And this was, the site was freshly created, completely new, done, but a lot of the content, including thousands and thousands of products and accessories and even news items and stuff, were migrated and imported, and also users, relations, translations, and all that stuff. And this used the same technology. So all these high pressure cleaners you can buy here. It's a multilingual site here. These are imported and exported using collective export import, and all the data in here. So there's tons of technical data. Where's the tech? Here's tons of technical data that used to be AT Vocabulary Manager. It now uses collective taxonomy, but all the data was exported and imported using collective export import. So that was very successful project for this use case. And the third one, I'm going to go into a bit more depth there, because there are some interesting code examples I can show you. So this is the German Climate Computing Center, Deutsches Klimarechenzentrum, and they have a lot of, oh God, I need to find the old code. So here's they have an old site, it's archetypes, and Python 2, obviously, and it has a yeah, a couple of interesting things that I want to show you. So it doesn't use lingua Plone. It uses Plone up. It uses Raptor's multilingual fields, and so here I need to set. This is what I'm doing in this code. So the fix-up request hook is used to set the language that is chosen in a custom form that I wrote to export all content. So there's a new browser view that is not part of export import that's called export all, and you can select the language that you want to export, and it goes through all content types that we want to export. Some of them we don't want to export, and then it stores these on the server using here export. This is the method from collective export import. So it just says download to server true, include blobs true, and voila, it creates files for each content type on the site. So this is the first interesting thing is the language, dealing with the language. So you get for each language, it has the same object. It deals with languages differently than lingua Plone did or Plone Up Multilingual does, because the English object and the German object in this case are the same object. They store the data in different, I think it's different annotations. It has some pretty dark magic in it, and but if you set the request right, if you use the default accessor and the default serializer, you get the values in the right language. That's cool. Here we're dealing with some single language items in the export, and here is an example for the global Dict hook, where we change from archetypes to dexterity. So description in archetypes is a text field, and text is also a text field. It just uses the rich text widget. So the schema type for description and a rich text field in archetypes is basically the same. So it's serialized in a different way than it is in dexterity, where description is a text field and rich text is obviously a different object. It's from Plone app rich text. I can't remember. Something like that, can't remember. So it needs to be changed a little so that the import data looks correct. We're dropping some items that we don't need. We're storing the default page here on the object, which is a feature that is not supported by the REST API. This is not yet added to export import, but will be. And here are some examples of how to deal with custom content types during export. For example, here there's weird data, some that needs to be changed because obviously very old content that has the instance is not a dict but a record from HTTP request here. So this needs to be changed. Then there's a custom content type that has a data grid field that stores basically links to content, and there it doesn't serialize. The data structure also doesn't work at all. So in this case, we're serializing it in a different way to be able to import that again. And then there is, that's even more interesting, custom serializers, because we can register your own serializer. In this case, we're using, we added a archetypes text field serializer that iterates over all the links in the data and drops all links if they go to a part of the project that is not migrated, but and the other links are changed to be to use resolve UID instead of static links. And then there's something else, I can't remember what there is. Yeah, some yes, CSS classes are logged in some places. So this is Also, migrations in export other are also subclass the relation export. This is something that is already documented in collective relation helpers, where you can map old relation fields to new relation fields, because the names may clash, because relationship in the past is responsible, and now it's called contact because the field just changed. This is what this example does. More importantly, more interestingly, is the import. I'll show you some short parts of that. It's done. Yep. So the import in the policy product for this project, it's not relaunched yet. I think we're planning to do the final migration on Friday. So here's also with subclassing the here's the subclass for the import. I'll show you a pattern for that in a sec. No, I already did show you the pattern with the hooks. It's also all in the README for that. So this also has a custom view that imports everything at once. So you just call this view and get a coffee, and then you got your migrated site. It has everything. It imports the JSON files from the file system for English and German, and deals with that. So what's interesting here is, there's a workflow state that is not in the new site, but it was on the old site, though it needs to be mapped. Similarly, you can see that here there's a couple of custom view fields. That is a feature of collections. So the old fields had these names and the new fields had these names. So there's code that maps this data in collections so that they work the same in archetypes and dexterity. And here's views like layouts. So old layout names, new layout names, so they're mapped. Portal types are changed for the queries in the collections and stuff like that. Let's see if there's anything. So these three are important because in description, as I already mentioned, because in dexterity the names for expiration date is different than in archetypes. So here in dexterity it needs to be called expires, and in archetypes it was expiration date. Same with effective date and effective, and exclude from nav to exclude from nav. Whoever thought that changing these names is a good idea? That is stupid. Probably collective export import needs a checkbox to automatically do these three and the description. If you check this box saying I want to migrate from archetypes to dexterity, then it can do these changes either during export or import automatically. It's just a super tiny change here. What else is interesting here? Well, this is just obvious, typical dealing with custom content types. So there's a content type called projects, and the old type had a different name. It was called Z space, I think, or dot projects, and we changed the name. Then we drop a couple of fields that are relation fields, and then we just here the start date used to be date time, and now it's date. So we just changed that because the serialization of date and date time is different, and so on. So it's a really nice way to do these tiny changes to deal with problems that if you'd have one Python object and another Python object would actually, and do that in place, would actually be much harder. And doing these changes in the dictionary is really a breeze. Also, we're linking translations because we can't export the translations from in Raptor's multilingual fields in the same way as we did as we can in LinguaPlone. We have to, because the items are the same, obviously. You check if it's English, and then you don't keep the UUID, otherwise you use it twice, and then you link to the translation, link these two translations, and so on and so forth. So it's actually not that much code, but it helps a lot. The import ordering also has to be done in a different way because they're the same objects, and the translations, have to be found because you only get one listing of orders for each UUID, and the English UUID, the English items have no custom UUID. So this is just a tiny example. It works fine. Let's get back into the presentation. There's a couple of issues and to-dos. Number one, and the most the toughest one probably, is that it's not a problem to have a complex folder structure and migrate that, but if you have a setup like folder department folder, that wouldn't work at the moment. The reason for that is that you should import folderish contents first and create the whole folder structure, and then create the content items. This can probably be, it would actually work to import that, but for the folder, for the second folder in this second line here, the parent, that is a department, a different content type, would be auto-created by the import code, but as a folder, unless you handle that in your own code, and that may be annoying to handle these edge cases differently. So it's totally possible to do that, but out of the box, this would create a folder structure that you're not expecting, because when you then import the department after we create folder, the department realizes, oh, there's already something in the place where I should be, so I'm going to be created next to that. So the folder is not inside the department, but in a folder, and you have a structure that doesn't fit what you want. There is another issue. You may have seen that in all my projects, I export the data as base 64 encoded strings. It worked fine because the biggest file I got was 1.2 gigabytes of, I don't know, files or something. And but if you have a huge database and you have more data than memory on your system, you need at least twice the memory than the file size, then the import will fail. So it would be good to have more blob options to handle blobs. You can skip this checkbox, but this won't help. Instead, there should be an option to export the blob path. It has a certain path in the file system, and it should be possible to just keep the blob storage in place, migrated to the new site, to the new location, and reattach these blobs. I haven't run into the problem because I have enough memory, but once I run into the problem, or if other people run into the problem, I think Fred did, there needs to be a solution for that. But as I said, this tool does not have to solve all issues. It's mostly intended to be, hey, there's your form. You click on a couple, you select the types you want to export, you get a couple of JSON files, and on your new site, you open the same form, just import content, not export, and you import your content, and you don't have to think about anything. You don't have to program anything, unless, but I'm a developer, so I use this tool for my custom migrations, but it should be easy, and the main intention is to use that to be able to use that without having to subclass and modify dicts and objects and use hooks and stuff. This is just for the advanced use case. So maybe if you run into this problem, maybe Transmogrifier would be a better solution for you. I'm not sure. I'm happy to discuss this issue at one of the next conferences. There's also the default page migration is not yet in there. Obviously, it's only in our client code. I'll move it in because the REST API doesn't support that. And talking about default pages, and you're wondering about this, a couple of things are weird. Why don't you just do all at once? Why do you export translations and relations not with the data? The reason is simple. It's a chicken and egg issue. If you create one item and it has a relation field to another item, but the other item hasn't been imported yet, there is no way to create that relation. So you would have to move that away. That's what the in-place migration from archetypes to dexterity does. And then take it out again and then reapply that. And since we don't want to add that much magic to have all the data in the serialized JSON and then store whatever we can't import at import time and delegate that to a later place, we just split that into different stages of import-export. And the same is true for default page, because the code to set a default page doesn't work if the default page doesn't exist yet. So that's why it has to happen separately. Yeah, you can also do all these things as an upgrade step. Also, it doesn't register a control panel, so you have to memorize the URL add export content. Maybe it should just do that. It doesn't install anything, wouldn't install anything else, not even a browser layer, because it registers a browser layer on the request on the fly during the migration to be able to use your custom serializers and deserializers that are a bit different from in 2 or 3 cases, a bit different from the ones in the REST API to support the base 64 thingy. That's basically it. Thanks to all our clients who made that possible. None of these clients finance the project directly, but they all agreed to, hey, sure, you can use the project you're working on for this migration, and I have no problem putting all of this in the public domain. So thank you to all of these, and thank you for listening. I'll show you the URL for the export import package. So it's on GitHub. Oh, it's here. Yeah, it's on GitHub. Called export import, and there are screenshots for that. It actually has nice buttons, and it works fine in Plone 6 and in Plone 5. It is also on Pipey. We're currently at release version 1.0 beta 1, and I have a couple of changes on my laptop that beg me to be released. So that's the current state. Feel free to open tickets, issues. Pull requests are extremely welcome, and I hope you'll use that in future projects, and it'll help you navigating the many issues that arise during migrations. Oh, let me, another item that I totally forgot is it doesn't support all features. So in-place migrations, if you have portlets, in-place migrations is the only way to keep your portlets, for example. It also doesn't migrate all your registry data. There is generic setup steps for that. It doesn't migrate the installed add-ons that you have, maybe because you don't want to migrate this information, and so on. So the use cases are limited to the ones I explained in my talk, and everything else would have to be on top. If there's something missing, please tell me. I'm happy to help you add that or help add it myself. Thank you, and have a great Plone Day. Thank you to the organizers of the World Plone Day, Rico, Pekka, and Enrico, mostly, who are doing the hard job of recording that. And see you soon. Bye-bye.